Hello and welcome. If you're new or returning, then thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Ariana, the host for the FLP webinars, and this month's topic is actually a great follow-up to last month's discussion on active shooter incidents. So if you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, just make sure to go back and check it out on our YouTube channel just as a recap. But we're excited to have Austin Davis with us again. Austin is the director of training at Conceal Coalition University, and he brings decades. I'm not saying your age or anything, but you bring a lot of years of experience in law enforcement, emergency response, and self-defense training. He's been on a lot of our webinars and has gone over topics over this and then some, but he's trained thousands of individuals, probably thousands and then some. I don't even know an exact number. I don't know if you do, but
35,000 paid seminars that I know of. So
wow. See, yeah, that's a big number. I said thousands and that seems small. 35,000, that exceeds.
But people in a virtual reality simulator over the last 12 years. So yeah, so large sample size here. Large sample.
Very. Yep. But he's trained thousands of individuals in life-saving tactics, trauma care, situational awareness, and this topic exactly as well. So in today's webinar, Austin will go beyond the basics of bleeding control, just like the topic of our webinar is. So he'll cover critical steps to take immediately after a shooting and even just some common medical misconceptions that there might be out there. But this is all just to ensure that we're all, me included, because I'm learning here as well, more equipped to take care of yourself and others in an emergency situation. But there will be a Q&A at the end, so make sure just to submit any questions that you have in the comments during the webinar. Also, this webinar is recorded, so you can always watch later or share with friends and family. But thank you, everyone, for joining to watch this month's webinar. Alrighty, Austin, do you want to get us started?
Hello, my FLP family. Austin Davis here. And man, I am glad to be here this month. Before we talk about the topic for this month, I might seem a little jacked up tonight because I've got my favorite cup of coffee here, but I've been out training baby cadets in an academy on Taser 7 all day, which if you've never played with this tool, it's pretty cool. It's got two cartridges. One's 12 degrees, one's 3 degrees. So one goes from about 3 feet to about 12 feet, and one goes from about 8 feet out to 22 feet. And you can adjust which one comes out with a simple twist. So I've got some good news report. I train officers a lot of times, and I don't really, a lot of times leave feeling that, my gosh, that these are future of law enforcement's in good hands. But I was out at a Lone Star College Police Academy today, 39 cadets. And I'm telling you, if there's more coming like this, we're in good shape. Great cops. So any of them y'all watching tonight, because I told you I was going to be on, keep doing what you're doing. Remember, in law enforcement, the most important thing is the badge says who hired you. Your name tag says who raised you. Do not do anything to disrespect either one of them, and you'll be okay. Enough said. Let's get started with our topic. Our topic this month is something very near and dear to my heart. Now, I know I usually say that because so much of what I teach is soft skills. You'll find I really don't spend a lot of time talking about guns with y'all because I really think that a gunfight is a very small part of a self-defense program. And if we can spend more time left of bang doing things so we don't get in the situation, if we can take a situation that without some proper training would need lethal force and get it to ordinary force or get it to avoidance, we win. But the one thing we usually don't think about is this. If you carry a tool designed to put holes in people, you probably want to learn how to patch holes in people. What's also interesting about this topic of trauma care is this is 100% applicable if you carry a firearm. Just have one in the home because it's an heirloom or a safe queen. If you use it for sporting, hunting, defense, or recreation, there's a chance that that thing can go off and punch a hole in you or someone else. And for my defensive gun users, which I assume it's most of my crowd tonight, here's the deal. If we get in a two-way shooting range and bullets go back and forth, if me or someone I'm with who I'm protecting is injured by the bad guy's firearm and I can't patch the hole and they bleed out, we lost the gunfight. Even if we took down the bad guy with the first perfect round we fired, but looked around and saw our family members were injured. Also, it's amazing the number of people every year that bleed out unnecessarily. When you think about it, what really kills people in an accident, it is blood loss. It's not infection. It's not the broken bone. It's the compromise of the vessels and blood not going the way it's supposed to go. Now, at this point, you're probably thinking, Austin, I know you probably have, 48, 52. It's hard to even keep track of how many certifications I have to teach instruction in this area. So you're probably going, Austin, you're probably a doctor or a trauma room nurse or an EMT or a paramedic or a witch doctor. None of that. I am a Stop the Bleed instructor. I teach the Department of Defense Stop the Bleed course. Very proud of that. And I think it's a wonderful course. And it is not a replacement we're going to talk about tonight. But if you take what I'm going to teach you tonight into the Stop the Bleed, you're going to be a lot farther. The real problem I have with Stop the Bleed is it does a good job of teaching you how to apply direct pressure, a tourniquet, and depending on who you have and what tools they have to teach you with and how passionate they are, how to pack a wound in those places that direct pressure or tourniquet might not work. But the problem is I also teach for alert, and I teach first responder medical. Because if you think about it as a police officer, if we're involved in a situation, it's not much different than you in your home or in some public place. They're not going to bring EMTs in until the scene's secure. So we may be on our own, not for 15, 20 seconds. We may not be on our own for the 3 or 4 minutes if you live in a place that's got really good response time for LE. We might be there for 15, 20, 30 minutes, better part of an hour. If it's a barricaded situation, they're just not going to send in EMS or fire to come in and save you and your family. So we need to be ready for this. Now, when it comes time to talk about this, the big topic I want to take you away tonight is that you learn to recognize life-threatening emergencies immediately, that you know how to read, recognize, and react to them, and that you understand you don't really need to be a trauma surgeon, be pretty helpful. Don't need to be a pararescueman, be very helpful. But what is we carry very limited tools, but these tools are really useful in a broad range, not just gunfights, but car crashes, power tool accidents, traumatic falls. The list goes on. And this training can make a big difference. About 6 weeks ago now, something like that, the wife and I were coming back from lunch on a Saturday afternoon, turned off one main street on another main street. And right as we turned, we see a vehicle that had just rolled over. I reached back behind the passenger seat. I keep a full-blown kit in a double Ziploc bag. I'll explain to you later on why I do that. In the little pockets behind the driver's seat, I keep one right behind the passenger seat. So if I'm in some sort of drive-by shooting or road rage incident and I'm driving off, I can grab that while I'm driving and still treat and maintain. I don't have to go to the trunk of the vehicle. I don't have to have it pop out underneath the seat. For me, it's the most logical place. I could grab my kit, go run on over. Fortunately, we got to sort of help stabilize the situation. And before I knew it, my local PD, which is Johnny on the spot, had rolled on up, and EMS, the box, was right behind it. But if they wouldn't have shown up, I had a lot of the skill sets, the equipment, and the training and the mindset that I think I could have stabilized this person. And remember, anytime we talk about bleeding control, you're going to have 3 different challenges. There's basically 3 kinds of patients you have. One is it doesn't matter what you don't do to them, they're going to live. There may be a lot of blood, but it's not life-threatening. Think of like a big scalp wound sometimes. It's not life-threatening, but man, they just bleed a lot. Then you have those patients that it doesn't really matter what you do, you can't save them. There's just nothing. If they're not on a surgical table, they're going to pass. And then you have that third kind of patient, which depends on the quickness and the quality of your techniques, equipment, mindset, and training to save that life. And that's what I'm here to talk about. And remember, we carry very limited equipment, but with that limited equipment, the right attitude, and a very small amount of plans, we can make a big difference. Now, again, I'm not a medical doctor, but I hang out with a lot of people who are, and I've been teaching this for over 12 years. And it's my understanding that a 6 millimeter or 1/4 inch nick on an artery is a 100% fatal if untreated. What's interesting about blood loss is we don't know where that point is. They lose enough blood to where we can't put it back in. I don't know at what point do we lose so much blood that our cognitive abilities start shutting down where we can't affect self-aid or buddy aid after we have this blood loss. And the thing we want to be so rabid about keeping blood in the body is I can always do mouth to mouth and put air back in the body. Once the blood has left the body, I've got nothing to perfuse the oxygen around the body. So we want to be as aggressive as we can about keeping every drop of blood in the body. Now, first thing, let's talk about equipment because we are gun people and we like stuff we can buy. First things first, number one thing I highly recommend you do is you carry gloves with you. As somebody who is a law enforcement officer, I have to stick my hands in nasty things all the time. Difference between something that's an amusing story later on at the dinner table and something that's some sort of lifetime trauma where you don't think you can ever get your hands washed off that is having gloves. When it comes to gloves, I have a pretty big hand. I'm a really big palm guy. I got some long fingers. So I really need an extra large glove to get in. I can kind of make it in a large glove, but if I'm under stress, I'm trying to put 5 fingers in 5 little holes and try to get it all in there. So I always carry extra large gloves. Also, all my gloves are blue or purple. I'm not a big fan of black gloves. Yes, it looks tactical, but if I have to do a blood sweep, a bath assessment, I'm able to sweep off the body. I need to look at my gloves and see if there's blood on them and then use that to track the source of the mechanism of injury. So for me, gloves are really important. And you can't have too many of them. They tend to tear on out. Next thing that I think is really important that no one ever wants to talk about is trauma shears. It's really hard to treat something you can't see. We're going to talk later on about the 3Ds, detect the mechanism of injury, direct pressure, and then a device if you have it. That's direct pressure. You have direct pressure holding it, but you can either pack the wound or use a tourniquet. Now, when it comes to trauma shears, a lot of people are very familiar with these things, little surgical shears. The problem is if you get cheap ones like this off Amazon for about 10 or 12 bucks, they flex, they don't stay sharp for very long, and they just suck. Pardon me, but they just suck at cutting stuff. This is my favorite brand of shear. It's called an X shear. They're about $35, but these bad boys are a game changer. And if I'm in a situation where I have to cut external vest off somebody, or I have to cut through a holster to get through because I can't get to the part of the body to treat, or if I'm working on somebody, I'm trying to put a tourniquet and I'm trying to go high on the thigh because I can't find the mechanism of injury below it, but I can't put a tourniquet over stuff in their pocket. Instead of taking time to dig it out, I just take this, run it right on in there, pull everything out, get right to my tourniquet, cinch it down, and go on about my business. Also, I'm a really big fan of making sure that your trauma shears are really a bright color, because a lot of times when you get through cutting something, you set it down. That may not be the mechanism you're looking for. You may have other injuries you have to go to. And if I've got black, it's dark, low compromise, light situation, I'm on a road top, whatever, the black shears just seem to lose it for me. So for me, a big bright orange color. After shears, we need tourniquets. Okay, tourniquets are a very long and complicated situation. There is the Tactical Committee for Combat Casualty Care. It's sort of like the good housekeeping seal of this stuff. And there are a bunch of people who really know about treating people with gunshot wounds and traumatic care. They use very good studies in the real world. They use scientific methods of figuring out if this thing actually does what it's supposed to do and actually does what percentage, because not all tourniquets are 100%, and some tourniquets work better on some limbs than others, in some situations others. Some might be better at it actually closing us off, but the mechanism is too fidgety, or they're too bulky or too expensive. For me personally, I really don't think you can go wrong with the North American Rescue Combat Application Tourniquet, commonly called the CAT. I really think this is the easiest tourniquet to put on one-handed. If you're ever in a public space and there's a stop the bleed kit, probably 95% of the time, one of these is going to be in there if there's in fact a tourniquet in there. And the great thing about this is it really is easy to self-apply and crank on down. The problem I have with the combat application tourniquet is, as good as it is, as much as I sing the praises of it, the little clips for the windlass and the mechanism of this makes it pretty bulky. And for me, you'll find out, excuse me, teaching taser chokes me up all day. The problem is I really don't think that one tourniquet is really enough tourniquets. I think 2 is really what you need. For most leg wounds, it's quite possible, especially if the person is really muscular, never miss squat day, or if the person is really obese, it may take 2 of these to get them on there. If you don't get the first one on there with the things we're going to talk about, the 3 steps of making sure you get the tourniquet on right, instead of having to pull that tourniquet off, start all over again, you just put another one on top, not on top, but right next to it, and cinch it on down. So when you start adding the bulk, these tourniquets kind of come on in. Can you go wrong with this tourniquet? No, you can't. The other one is a soft T. What I like about this is this tourniquet packs down very small. What I also like about this, other than the small form factor when it folds down, is all the hardware is metal, and it's very easy for me to undo the band on this thing and wrap it on around and clip it back in. I think there's a lot of advantage to that. And the one thing that just makes my heart happy is there's a metal windlass. This is what takes the webbing inside the circumferential band and actually tightens it down. If you don't have a windlass, you don't really have a tourniquet. So whether you pick either one of these, that's okay. I think if you put one of these and one of these in your kit, that'd be a really nice start. I don't think there's anything wrong with carrying 4 tourniquets. If you've got the room for it, if it's in a car or a backpack or a purse or a home kit. And the reason is we have 4 limbs. So I'm not saying you're going to get shot in all 4 limbs or destroyed in them, but it may take 2 on my leg. It may take 1 on the other leg and 1 on my arm. For me, a mass casualty is when I have more appendage injuries than I have available tourniquets. And to use a really tough analogy is, think of the Boston Marathon bombing. We had a lot of limb wounds there, and there was people having to makeshift a tourniquet. And that is a very difficult thing to do when time is life, about saving every drop. One thing you can do that can make the tourniquet a lot more effective for you is buy some blue training tourniquets. They're fairly inexpensive. We're talking $23, $27, something like that. Leave it near your TV while you're doing Netflix and chill. Just putting on each limb one arm application, one leg at a time. Go ahead and have your significant other, your kids practice on you. Just lay down on the floor and don't try to help them when they try to put it on. Sit there. Go ahead and put it on there. Make them lift it up like it's an injured limb and kind of work on it and learn how to actually work with a tourniquet. Tourniquet application is a perishable skill, and having a practice tourniquet will really help. I know this because as an alert instructor that's law enforcement rapid response, active shooter rapid response training, what we do is after the police officers that we train, it's for active shooter events. After they shoot the people, they have to go ahead and provide medical. And they've just been through a high stress situation. We're shooting each other with ammunition pistols. And I see a lot of failure for these people to put the tourniquets on properly. And these are officers who have 5, 10, 15, 20 years of experience and been through many trauma training classes on the way. But when we put them in the actual pressure testing, it kind of comes on down. I think the trick to that is just have a blue training tourniquet and pass it on. The reason why I don't want you to have your regular tourniquet is your practice tourniquet is. They're not built for repetition. You do a whole bunch of reps with this thing. You start to wear out the Velcro. You start to get the webbing sort of gets kind of slippery. So just have a practice tourniquet and dedicate yourself to it. Next thing is wound packing material. Now, some of you out there are getting all excited because you go, oh, yeah, we're talking about combat gauze. Yes, we are. Hemostatic agents are incredible stuff. There is material in there, and it depends on which one you have. If you have C-locks, there's different mechanisms that help the clotting, the cascade effect. The problem is I've personally never seen anything that says if you use this versus just plain gauze, that there is a decrease in mortality. Having said that, when you look at my external vest, there's a big pocket here that I wear when I'm on patrol, and it's full of medical gear. First line gear, it goes with me everywhere. I got a bigger kit in the car, okay? But I have one of these in there. But I don't think this is really what saves you when it comes time to pack a wound. I think it is pressure is king technique. And the cool thing is this is about $55 for this, and the chance of you opening this up and practicing with it are very slim. Just plain Z-fold gauze is like $1.25, $2.50. It's the exact same material in here, but it just doesn't have the hemostatic agent. I would much rather you buy 20 of these, open 3 of them, know how the Z folding works, how to pick it out, how to make a power ball, and then make some sort of modified. You can use a couple pool noodles and a piece of PVC pipe, Google it, it'll tell you how to do it. Make a wound packing kit, or if you have a wound cube, just use the plain gauze and practice with that. If I had 2 people come up to help me after I had some sort of traumatic injury that's a heavy bleeding situation in a junctional area underneath the armpit and the groin, the buttocks, the neck, and somebody says, wow, I spent the money and I've got 10 packages of this, but I've never practiced. But somebody goes, yeah, I bought 20 of these. And I burned off 5 of them in practice on my wound cube, or I made a little wound packing tool, training tool. I'd much rather have this person there. So when it comes into it, if you can afford it, great. The only problem is it takes a whole lot of this to pack a wound if it's really big or there's multiple wounds. And once you run out of this, it's kind of tough. You can have one of these and then back it up with a bunch of these. And depending on how many wounds or patients you have to go, you can pull out enough of the hemostatic, cut it with your trauma shears, power ball it, pack it in first, then go ahead and put this on the top of it and still have a lot of coverage and not have to spend a whole bunch of money. Pressure dressings. These are sort of like massive traumas band-aids, okay? This is for severe bleeding, but it's not arterial, it's not life-threatening. And my favorite of these is the Olay's modular bandage. You can get them off Amazon. This is probably $6-7, something like that. The cool thing is when you open this up, it's sort of like if a Ace bandage met packing material and they had a love child. Okay. So the cool thing is inside this, it's like all wrapped up in Ace bandage. You can pull it out, stuff it, pack it in the wound. And then as you're holding direct pressure, once you get bleeding control on it, then you can wrap the whole thing up with this Ace bandage and really crank it down and get some good pressure on it. So pressure bandage is wonderful. Now, going back though, this is some of my favorite stuff. It's called Battle Wrap, and it's like saran wrap meets duct tape. What I like is after I pack the wound and I get direct pressure on it, I can pull the Battle Wrap out. There's 6 feet of this stuff. It's self-clingy. It's sort of like it's like saran wrap met Scotch tape met duct tape. But the cool thing is after I wrap the thing that I just packed to keep the pressure on that, to keep the vessels occluded so that we keep the bleeding from starting up again, it's see-through. So I can see when the bandages are getting saturated. Every time I move them, I can look down really quick through the see-through material and check it. I think this is about 10 or 12 bucks for a roll of this. And a bunch of these, I think they're going to pack down a lot better than this. And I'm not unconvinced that this may not be a better way for you to go. A space blanket. The thing about a space blanket is a lot of people carry one of these little things right here. Sometimes it's even smaller and compressed. These things are 4 feet by 5 feet. And the problem is I'm not 4 feet by 5 feet. I'm much bigger. I prefer this space blanket right here. It's made by SOL, which sounds like surely out of luck, but it means survive outdoors longer. This is the XL. You can wrap them up like a tactical burrito. We're going to find out later on one of the keys to keeping bleeding control is to making sure the patient doesn't get too cold. The problem with them getting too cold is after a certain level, blood doesn't want to clot. After a certain point of that, it just won't clot. And then while you have the space blanket, this is another cool thing to put in your kit. These are little hand warmers. You pop them open, expose them to air, shake them. You can put them underneath people's armpits in the fold of their groin, then wrap them in the space blanket. If they're already on the way to hypothermia, they may not be generating enough heat to kick it back out. So this and this don't take up much space. You take it out the box, but I like keep it in the box to show everybody. But these things are really flat, very compact, and can do a whole lot to extend the lifespan of somebody. I'm also a big fan of this. You take an old hotel key that you still have around and wrap it in Gorilla Tape. This is, I think, 9 feet. And there's just a million things you can do if you have something like this. If nothing else, once I wrap up the space blanket, I can go ahead and just secure the sides of it with the duct tape and keep them in there. But it has a million different uses. So you just can't go wrong with having some tape. Also, I'm a really big fan of carrying a big, fat magic marker with you because once I applied the tourniquet, maybe I want to write in the forearm, what time I applied it. Usually we are so close to medical care, that's not important. But if we're in some sort of barricade, some sort of mass casualty event where it may be a while, the medical people need to know when that thing went on so they can take the appropriate steps to make sure that the blood that's coming back in past from the downside of that limb can be dealt with properly. If I'm talking to somebody in recovery and they tell me I've got a latex injury, maybe I'll write latex injury on it. If somebody tells me, hey, my phone number of my next of person of contact, I hate saying next of kin because you're going to live. No matter what happens, you're going to live. Even if you look like you're not, I'm going to tell you you're going to be okay. Maybe write that down on there, their ID. There's just a million uses for a pen in there. It doesn't take up much room. Now, once you've gathered your equipment, all that equipment's nice. And one of the things about being the National Director of Training for Concealed Coalition is we have concealed carry trainers all over the United States. And I tell them all the time, guys, we need to make sure we have proper ways to treat this. But whether I'm talking to law enforcement, whether I'm talking to range safety officers, whether I'm talking to just everyday, regular, good guy defensive gun users, most people don't know what order to put all this stuff in. One of the things that really amazes me is an alert instructor, and I hold 8 certificates. I teach everything from breaching to first responder medical to external response to active threats with these officers. But what happened when I was in training for my first responder medical, I got to tell you an ugly story about me. Went through a scenario, and I had to go through the building, find out where the shots are coming from, breach the door, go in, shoot the bad guy's down, secure the bad guy. And basically, we've got 12 role players in the room with all this moulage. Alert's really good about this. They've all these mock injuries. They look realistic. It's a hard time for your brain. It's such high fidelity that this isn't real. And they're all going, help me, help me, help me. And they're in different states of awareness and cognitive ability. And they're really mimicking what a real person would do. I locked up. I'm like, dude, I'm a cop. This is like new to me. You shoot the bad guy, you put him in handcuffs, you get the fire guys in there. Well, we can't get the fire guys in until we find out if that's the only shooter and the scene's secure. Then we have a whole protocol on how we get EMTs in there because we put a cop in front and a cop in back and got him in, got him out. It was life-changing to me. And over the course of all my training in that, now it becomes second nature after down of how to prioritize, who's going to live no matter what I don't do, who's going to die no matter what I do, and who needs attention right now. There's a lot of ways you can use a protocol. If you're current military or prior military, you probably have MARCH, which is an acronym, mnemonic, one or the other. I can't remember which one's which, on treatment. And if you use that and you're having good luck, great. For me, it's really hard to remember under stress. I just like a lot simpler process. And for me, it's stop. So we have our equipment, and our equipment could be an ankle kit. Okay. It could be 2 Ziploc bags in a container in the back of your car. The reason I like Ziploc bags, 2 containers, is it makes it easy for me to section this out so I can have my tourniquets on the outside, my trauma shears on the outside, so I get to those quickly. If I need to treat somebody, I pull the first bag out, dump everything out, put the Ziploc bag over my hand and press down on it. Whether you have a full-blown sexy kit like my patrol kit, everybody around me always knows if we're on the range or we're on patrol, just grab the red strap and bring it to me. No matter what you have for a container and in there, once you have a situation developing, you have to have a plan. So if you're in a situation where you have a car crash, a gunshot wound, whatever, just remember, stop. Stop. S-T-O-P. First thing is security, scene safety. Stop. Scene safety, the first one. The reason is there's really 2 kinds of places we can treat a person: direct and indirect threat care. Let's think of this car crash. The first concern I had was this car's rolled over, and fortunately the occupant was wearing a seatbelt and had gotten out, but in the process it kind of banged herself up, and she's kind of half crawling out through this broken window. Now, the problem is when I finally helped her kind of get on out of the vehicle, didn't want to treat her in the middle of the street. We still got traffic going by. If we are in Las Vegas and all of a sudden some knucklehead on the 32nd floor starts shooting it out of the concert we're at, and you are standing next to me and you see me get shot and fall down, and you think 3Ds, detect, direct pressure, and then a device, and you're still on the path of travel and you get shot. Now we got 2 victims. You can't help me. I can't help you. We're in trouble. So always think scene safety. We do not treat on the direct threat. So if you're in an active shooter situation, that person got shot there, prima facie evidence, probably good shot, good reason that he might get shot again. So if you can pull it behind cover or at least concealment before you start treating, that could be very helpful. Also, when it comes to scene safety, maybe just take just a second for a tactical pause, just a quick, and then just look around and just see what's going on around you, see if there's any other threats. Because the problem is when we talk about taking care of people in critical dynamic situations, sometimes good tactics make for bad medicine, and sometimes good medicine makes for bad tactics. So you may decide how much risk you want to stay, and you don't want to treat on the X if there's any other option. And moving a patient is a whole other category, something I cover in my Beyond the Bleeding course, which is like stop the bleed on steroids, because there's a whole lot of things that we really don't have time to cover and stop the bleed. But again, I cannot recommend, if you don't do anything else after this, take this knowledge as sort of a little pre-class material and go to a good stop the bleed class. It's about 2 hours out of your life, and you're going to be a lot better off for it. So S, first thing is scene safety. We don't treat it in direct threat. We treat it indirect threat. So kind of pull it out. If we're in a mass shooting situation and that person's in a hallway, we don't own hallways. We rent hallways, pull them into a room, get security on this thing. Next thing, STOP, T, treat the bleeding. I said it before, but let's go over it again. Every drop of blood we lose is just that sort of greasy slide down into shock and then death. So we want to make sure we try to save all the blood we possibly can in this situation. And remember, the fastest way to think about stopping the bleeding is direct. First off, detect it. Find out where the source of it is. You may need trauma shears if you got them to cut some pants up or cut some shirts up, and then find out where it is. Direct pressure. If you think about it, direct pressure is kind of like a natural response. If you cut yourself in the wrist, first thing you do is you're going to do this. You cut yourself in the arm, first thing you do this. First thing you do in your leg. It's kind of built in for us. Direct pressure is really good. I think it's kind of underrated. The only problem I've got with direct pressure is the good news is you have the tools you need to put direct pressure always with you. The bad news is you can't return fire. You can't move the patient. You can only treat one wound on one patient in one site. And if you've got more than one wound that needs direct pressure. So the great thing about direct pressure is not only knowing where the brachial arteries are, the femoral arteries, but also having presence of mind to be able to take command of the situation. You know, my thought, if you're ever in a bad situation, look around and go, Jiminy Cricket, there's no one in charge. Someone needs to be in charge. Point your finger at yourself. Take charge. You over here, come here. Put your palm right here. Get your arms straight. Get your weight over your arms. Press really hard when I take my pressure off. Do you understand me? Make sure they get that message and get them to put direct pressure. One of the things I really like about using people on scene to help me out with a situation is because I really think it helps a lot in their recovery from seeing some horrific thing. Law enforcement officers see horrific things every day, a lot of times, many times a day. But for some people, this is life altering for them to see this car crash, this bus crash, this critical situation. And sometimes they just need something to kind of snap them out and let them help. And I really think as they look back on this experience, days, weeks, months, years later on, the fact that they were put to work and did something well. So as long as you think that they're not going to freak out and do something damaging, don't be afraid to call in for help. But you're probably going to have to direct them. Most people are not going to step up and just do what you got to do. So S is for scene security. T is for treat the bleeding. We have 3 tools to treat the bleeding. We have direct pressure, and that works really well. Again, it's limited. We have tourniquets, which work really well, but they only work for extremities, and you can't put a tourniquet at anything but a right angle to the limb. So there's a certain point that the tourniquet just can't go up anymore. And if we get shot somewhere in here or somewhere in the hip, the groin, the buttocks area, up in the neck, we're going to have to pack it. That means we're going to take some sort of absorbent material and we're going to push it down in the hole until we hit something solid at the bottom, and we're going to pack. We'll talk about that a little more in depth later on. So S, secure the situation. T, treat the bleeding. We have tools to do that, which is direct pressure, tourniquets, and wound packing. Next thing is O, stands for open airway. The thing about open airway is it could be a number of different things. One, it could be they were chewing bubble gum, middle of a meal, something's lodged down in their throat. We'll talk about specifics on that in a minute. It could be a hole somewhere between the little notch right here in the navel that's causing this chest cavity to have some sort of problem with respiration. That's 2 problems: open pneumothorax and a tension pneumothorax. So those could be a problem. And then also sometimes the only thing you can do is sometimes put them in a recovery position, which is where you put them on their side, hand is here, sort of makes their elbow a kickstand, roll the top leg on over, and then lift the chin so that if they throw up or they're bleeding, gravity takes care of that and puts it on out. And then finally, last thing is prevent shock. So if you're in a bad situation, hopefully you have your gear with you and you don't know what to do, just go STOP, stop. First thing, scene security. Make sure that no one else is going to get shot where you're standing. No one else is going to get hit by a car where you're going to be there. That your scene security is, I don't know these people and I don't know if they have blood pathogens. I don't want to treat unless I have some sort of, pathogen protection on there. Next thing is treat the bleeding. We have to keep every drop of blood we can in the body because once it hits the ground, we can't put it back in. Next thing is open airway. So make sure that, we have the airway as open as we can, no obstructions, and that we have this. If it's open, you find a way to close it off, and maybe if nothing else, recovery position. And then finally, the P and stop is prevent shock. Remember, calm is contagious. Keep everybody around you calm as possible. Keep the patient as warm as possible, and keep them as occupied as you can, because the more I can talk to them in a calm, reassuring voice, maybe a nice appropriate touch on the shoulder, maybe a nice appropriate touch of the hand, and tell them, hey, look, I've seen worse. I'm not going to leave you. You're doing great. And start talking about the future. Hey, when we get you to the hospital, who's the first person to call? And tell them that you had a bad situation, but you're going to be okay. I really like talking in the future tense and positive tense when I discuss this. Okay. STOP. Now, let's start with the basics and get down to it. Treat the bleeding. One of the questions people always have in some sort of massive is, what do I do first? Well, first thing is the bleeding. Okay, well, what if I got multiple bleeding sources? Worse is first. So what is really bad bleeding? Because for some of you, if you cut yourself in the kitchen and it's bleeding pretty hard, like think about your thumb. I don't know if you ever cut your thumb. Man, that sucker just bleeds up really good. that's probably not mass amounts of blood. Somebody flashes on their head and it doesn't penetrate the skull. Just there's a lot of blood vessels up in this area. And man, it looks like they're losing a lot of blood. When we talk about massive bleeding, when you approach a patient from a distance, you can see the blood spurting out and you can take their pulse from visual. You can actually see it spurting out. That's never a good sign. If there's so much blood underneath them and it's been out for so long that it's starting to coagulate, that's really bad. If it's soaking through the clothing, that's really bad. If your first response is, holy cow, that's a lot of blood, that's pretty bad. And we might want to jump on top of it. Now, how do we do that? Well, we have a number of tools. First off, if it's an extremity wound and you have a quality tourniquet, this shouldn't be a problem. Well, first off, let me back up. I interrupt myself. First thing is direct pressure. The reason I'm a big fan of direct pressure as your primary tool is because it's going to take me a second to get my tourniquet out of my kit, get it out of my ankle kit, get it out of my vest or whatever. If I can slap direct pressure and maybe it doesn't completely stop it, maybe it slows it down 20%, 50%, 80%, 5%. I'll take that. I'll take that as a win. At least I'm keeping as much blood as I can while I'm working on a tourniquet or finding someone else to say, hey, help me hold pressure on this thing because I don't have enough circumference or I've got to work on other problems. So direct pressure first. If you have a tourniquet with you and it's an extremity wound, tourniquets only work on extremity wounds. Can't put them on a neck, can't put them on a shoulder. You can't wrap around your buttocks. They're specialized things, but that's beyond the scope of this conversation for pelvic binding to kind of help that. But for most of us, for our standard tools, though, the great thing about a tourniquet is, boom, just go ahead and it works really well. Now, some things about tourniquets. There's going to be 3 common mistakes you're going to make with a tourniquet. The first one is the wrong location. We have these moulage wounds, and if we're not in the mood to do some fancy moulage wounds, we just put a piece of red tape to simulate where the mechanism of injury is going to be. It is amazing how many people I see, especially my police officers, not slamming my cops, I'm one, but we're not trained in that area unless you're a specialized person who trains cops and first responder medical, like myself. A lot of times when they're in a hurry, they'll put the tourniquet on and it will be below the wound. Remember, for this tourniquet to work, it's got to be above the mechanism of injury. And so the first problem is they put it in the wrong location. Some people try to put it over a joint, whether it's a knee joint or the elbow joint. It's really difficult, if not impossible, to get the bleeding to stop in extremity if you have it over there. Kind of the general guideline is they say 2 to 3 inches above the wound. The only problem I've got with that is we're gun people, and I don't know if the bullet went in here and came out up here. So for me, if I see bleeding extremity, for me, I'm going to try to go as high as I can, as tight as I can. When I go as high as I can, the problem is I've got to be very careful that I don't go too high. If I try doing something like this with the application up on the shoulder because it's high here, as I start cranking this down, it's going to come perpendicular to the limb. So I can only go as high on the arm or the leg as I can without it being at an angle to the limb. Hope that's coming clear to everybody. So first thing is wrong location. Another wrong location is if you're trying to put it high on the thigh and people have something in their pockets or like a cell phone, a money clip, whatever, a vape pen. If you go to try to put it over that, you may not get the circumferential pressure you need to stop that bleeding. So high and tight, but first thing is make sure it's in a proper location above the wound, and the location is everything. So take a fraction of a second just to double check to make sure that there's no upstream bleeding from this, that you actually do have it. If you're not sure and time's the problem, just go as high and as tight as you can. The next problem is it's not tight enough. The problem is when you think about this, the way a tourniquet works is it comes on around and it hooks through this buckle, okay? And when you tighten this down, you're not really occluding it yet. It's this inner band right here, okay? And when I turn the windlass, can you see how it sort of cranks that down? That's what does it. But there's a very small amount that windlass will lock down in. So the first problem is we put it in the wrong location. The second problem is when we cinch this up, we don't make the first one tight enough. So we have the tourniquet on, we cinch it down and we think, okay, that's good enough. There's still a lot of slack in this thing. I'm not sure at this point in time, if I went and started turning my windlass, there'd be enough here to get occlusion. So what I highly recommend is after you make the first bite on this thing, crank down one more and really get good adhesion. The cue I try to tell people is when you put this tourniquet on the first wrap, when you think you got it tight enough and ready to go ahead and cinch it down and work on the windlass, crank it another fraction of an inch. Then when you start cranking on down, away we go. And then the third problem is a lot of people forget, excuse me, coffee time, Joe. My favorite brand of coffee, my favorite coffee cup, is they forget to turn the windlass or they don't turn the windlass enough. So how many turns of the windlass do you need to put into this system to make this patient stop bleeding? 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, as many as you need to get the bleeding stopped. And if you get to where you can't turn anymore, it's just bound on itself, then we have 2 choices. Either you're going to have to go ahead and just lock down what you've got and then put another one on right next to it, underneath it, or if you have room above it, make sure they're close and touching, make sure the windlasses don't interfere with each other, and then crank it down. So the real trick is taking that extra little half second to make sure that you've taken all that slack out. So tourniquets, real simple. Proper location, proper initial tension, proper making sure you turn the windlass, and the proper number of windlass turns in there. The tourniquet's going to hurt the patient probably more than the mechanism of injury. I'm going to sound a little cruel here, and it's not because I don't love you and I don't love your patient, and especially if it's me or you doing it to each other. Pain is the patient's problem. I'm here to save their life. This discomfort, I got it. I spend a lot of time with these things in training. When I'm the role model, the little role player on the ground, they put tourniquets all over me when they putting protection as they're trying to work on how to bring the next firefighters in. So I've got these things on me all the time. They do hurt. They are uncomfortable, but they will save a life. So is a tourniquet of value? Yes. We had a Houston police officer not so long ago, sergeant, who got lit up behind a retail establishment in the middle of the night. The bad guy came out from behind a dumpster and just ambushed and lit up in his car. The sergeant's just a heck of a warrior. He gets out after being all shot. They have a gunfight across the car, managed to shoot the bad guy. Bad guy makes it about 75 feet, and then he takes the concrete snow angel challenge on the other side of the building, and the officer's down. All of a sudden, all these responding units show up, and he starts screaming, "Give me a tourniquet, give me a tourniquet." He'd been shot through both legs and both arms. So I think there was a total of like 6 or 7 tourniquets on him to finally get the bleeding stopped. So right location, right initial tension, use of the windlass, and the correct use of the windlass. So we got tourniquets. What do you do about those situations though? A couple of quick things about tourniquets. Anytime you move the patient, so if you decide, man, I'm going to treat here on the X, I'm going to treat here in a direct threat environment because I need to stop this bleeding real quick because I got to pull them a lot away. Anytime you move them to the secondary scene or the casualty collection point, reassess every one of your adjuncts that you use to control those bleedings, to double check it. Also, it's not a bad idea every 4 or 5 minutes, if you got time, to come over and check it. If you've got other patients and other priorities, you got to go get the first responders into the secure location you're at, or hold long in a hallway or whatever is going on, then take somebody, bring them over here and say, "You, come here. What's your name?" "Sally." "Sally, this is Austin." "Austin, this is your new best friend, Sally. Sally's going to check this every 3 to 5 minutes. Sally, you got that?" "Yeah." "What are you checking for?" "See if there's any bleeding coming in. If there is, I need you to tighten on the windlass or put another tourniquet on, or call for me to come over here and put another adjunct on to figure it out." So kind of a little bonus. Also, one other thing is, please order. I cannot believe I almost forgot this. Thank God I got my notes right here. Don't order your tourniquets off of Amazon. I highly recommend contacting North American Rescue and ordering directly from them. The knockoffs on Amazon do not do the same. As you start cranking down, the webbing's really cheap and the buckles are thin, and it sort of kinks up on itself, and it's just not really the way to go. So I highly recommend you get them directly from the manufacturer. You're going to end up paying another few bucks, but your life is really worth it. It's like buying discount sushi at a gas station or a cheap parachute. There's just some things we don't want to run risk of. Now, wound packing. What do we do when we have a situation where we have an injury that's near an extremity, but it's not able to be used with a tourniquet? Then we're going to have to wound pack. So these are called compressible wounds. The first thing you want to do is you want to find the source of bleeding. Again, trauma shears, cut up that pants leg, cut up that shirt, look in there. When you're looking for the bleeding, if you can't find it, don't be afraid to look underneath the breast, armpits. If someone's got a lot of rolls of fat, look underneath there. So bullets take really weird channels through things, and traumatic injuries, bones can break and pop out and cause all kinds of problems. So don't be afraid to look. Once you've identified where it's at, here's what we got to do. We have to identify the source of bleeding. Then we have to go ahead and pack it. There's 2 kinds of wound packing we can do. I'm going to give you a short version of this, but really come to class, learn to do it well. There is deliberate packing and there's blind packing. So let's say that this slit right here is a grazing gunshot wound or a chainsaw or whatever. If I just start packing cotton down there willy-nilly, I may not get the direct source of bleed. So deliberate packing means I'm going to go ahead and scoop some blood out, or I'm going to take my finger down in there and I'm going to push around until I can feel pulsing, like a water pistol squirting on your finger, or you can kind of feel their pulse in there. And if I can find that bleeding and I can stop it with direct pressure at that point in time, now I can take my time, keep direct pressure on there, get my wound packing material, and start to deliberately pack. When you're digging around looking for the source of wound, though, you need to be really careful. If it was a kinetic wound, a bullet wound, or something hitting it really fast, there may be bone shards in there. And if I'm not real careful, one of two things. One not so bad thing in the chart of bad things is that bone goes in. I'm now sharing blood pathogens with some stranger. I'm digging around in a wound in their body. But the bigger problem is if I'm not real careful, I'm just cramming around in there, aside from the obvious, causing the patient incredible unnecessary pain. I could easily take and push one of those bone shards, which could be very sharp, into another vessel, creating another wound that is deeper and more difficult to assess than the one that's been traumatically sliced in on. If you dig around and you can't find within about 15 or 20 seconds the source of it, then just go ahead and blind pack. Blind packing means I'm going to go ahead. Deliberate packing is pretty simple. I'm going to take my material. I'm going to make a power ball. Okay. I'm going to take it down there where I find the source of the bleeding. Okay. Then I'm going to take this power ball and I'm going to swap them out and try to keep as much pressure as possible. Pressure is king. What I'm trying to do is take those blood vessels and pack so much cotton so hard that those blood vessels actually clamp down, get squished down and stop. And then every time I take my finger to put the next one in, I need to make sure that I can keep the pressure on and switch. If every time I press that I take the finger off, then I get more in there, that adds up to seconds of bleeding. And it could blow out a clot that's already forming, or it could just be too much time for blood loss in there. Once we get through packing as far as we can, want to build it on up, push down with direct pressure, keep checking on this thing. If it is the hemostatic stuff, 3 to 5 minutes minimum. If it's not hemostatic, 5 to 7 minutes. And then at that point in time, if you can, just keep direct pressure on it, get someone to hold it. If not, you can go ahead and use something like your battle wrap. You can use a SWAT tee, which I think is not a great tourniquet, but it's sort of like a rubber band. An ace bandage had a love child. And you can take this thing and stretch it and wrap it around there. And that turns that into a really great pressure dressing that's a lot easier to control. What I like about the battle wrap, though, remember, it's like cellophane. So I can look through there. I can see if it starts bleeding through every 3 to 5 minutes when I check it or anytime I have to move them. Wound packing is an incredibly perishable skill, and you really need a good trainer, and you need someone to really watch to make sure your technique's good. If you just bought a wound cube, they're about $250. You can make a wound cube yourself, something similar, a wound packing tool. The problem is, though, is you're just stuffing cotton in a crack or a hole, and you're not really maintaining and figuring out how to get the pressure on there with a coach. You may just be practicing techniques that don't work. Remember, practice doesn't make perfect. It just makes permanent. So make sure you understand that the 3Ds: direct pressure, first detect it, direct pressure, tourniquet if you have one and it's appropriate for it is. If not, you can wound pack. Also, if you get in a bad situation, you run out of tourniquets, it's a mass casualty event, you can still pack something that, if you had a tourniquet, seal off. The only problem is it takes time to pack, and you might be shocked at how much cotton it will take to pack in there. I just don't think you can pack too many of these in your kit, because some of these wounds are big and it will take a lot of material to pack in there. You may have multiple wounds that you're going to need more. Now, yes, you can take your trauma shears and cut their t-shirt into strips and pack it down in there, but that takes a lot of time. And I don't know if it's a polyester shirt, or if it's absorbent, or it just runs into a whole bunch of problems. It's better to have the pre-made kits. Kind of like, you can improvise a tourniquet, but by the time you find the stick or the screwdriver or the wrench or the metal pin, cut the strips and do the thing, zip, I could be done with that patient, put them in a recovery position, put someone on top of them and say, here, Billy, it's your new best friend. Watch this person, call me, check them every 3 to 5 minutes if something happens. Next thing is open airway. How do we manage an airway? Well, first off, if the person is bleeding, like a facial shot, STOP, scene safety, secure the situation. Okay, T, treat the bleeding, open airway. If you get some sort of facial shot or whatever, some of these are real survivable. especially if it's across this way or whatnot. The problem is they can choke their own blood. So to manage the airway here, we may just want to put it in a position to where all the blood and the gore is draining out and they can still get breath in them. A lot of times we want to put somebody and lay them on their back or whatnot, which may not be the best for them. Also, for an open airway, if they've had some sort of chest injury, ask the patient what feels comfortable. Let them move around and find something. Sometimes they feel good with their legs up and they're flat. Sometimes they feel better if they're moving around. Sometimes they feel better if they're on one side or the other. Let them experiment to kind of find what's going on. If they've got bubble gum, they've got food, whatever in their mouth, you might not want to stick your hand in there to scoop it out. The problem is you start getting about 9 more chances, 8 more chances, 7 more chances to try that trick out. There's also a risk of pushing the food on down in there. So maybe a back slap on this thing, maybe just trying to get a chin lift and roll them into recovery position and see if that kind of moves it on out. And then some application of back slaps, possibly a Heimlich to try to get it out if you can. But try to keep that airway as open as possible. Next thing is if it's between neck and navel, one of the standard treatments they have is a chest seal. A chest seal is something like a big sticker that goes over. These are vented so that when the pressure builds up in the chest cavity, in theory, it can go ahead and vent out. My thing is if you have an open chest wound and they're still breathing, I'm really afraid to put this on them because I'm afraid I'm doing what's called a tension pneumothorax, which means the pressure builds up in there and can cause death. So for me, I'm really nervous about that. If they're having breathing problems and I slap on a chest seal, especially a vented chest seal, it can get blood and goo in there. So keep an eye on them. If they start having discoloration, you start noticing that the larynx moving off to one side or whatnot, you may have to lift an edge up and kind of burp it. I'd be very careful. You may have to reach in there and kind of clear that out to kind of get it to allow them to breathe. My theory is this. If you want to use a chest seal, that's a recommended thing. My deal is this. If somebody got shot anywhere between here and the navel, the treatment I really want to give them is gasoline, diesel, or aviation fuel. I'll repeat that. If we're around and you get a traumatic injury from your neck to your navel, I really want to treat with gasoline, diesel, or aviation fuel. I don't mean pouring it on them. I mean, we throw them in a personally owned vehicle, POV, or the patrol car and haul them right to next level of care. Diesel, we bring a box in, EMS, get them next level of care at the EMS, haul them in there. Aviation fuel, clear the landing helicopter spot for them and bring in life flight and have them out of there. The problem is if it's between here and here, some people think they can pack that wound. These are non-compressible areas. Stuffing cotton here is only going to make things worse. So yes, you can do the wound packing in a junctional area where there's muscle and meat and bone, but here it's all chest hollow and whatnot, and you can't pack it in there. So if they are having trouble breathing and you want to slap a chest seal on them, make sure that you clear it. Make sure if you're going to seal it that you look underneath the armpit, underneath the breast, rolls of fat, wherever. Slap one on the front, one on the back. If this is making things worse, don't be afraid to burp it or even remove it. But you do want to keep an eye on them if they get shot between here and here. As far as I'm concerned, that's a priority. The only way they're going to get better at that point in time is on a surgical suite. So just get them moving and get them moving as quick as you can. Sorry, I'm going to my notes again because this is kind of tough. Recovery position, again, I kind of have a hard time explaining without moving everything out and kind of getting on the floor and showing you. Do a little Google foo and find out what that is. Recovery position is awesome, especially if you come across somebody that you've already treated. They're not conscious. They're breathing raspy. Sounds like they're kind of like snoring, like you have sleep apnea kind of thing. Roll them over in the recovery position. The great thing is follow-on responders can look and they can see someone who's in a recovery position and go, look, they've already been dealt with. People don't fall in that position naturally. I'll go look for other patients that need the care, that their survival depends on the quickness and quality of my actions. The last of STOP is secure the situation, treat the bleeding, open airway, prevent shock. The best way to prevent shock is calm is contagious. It's amazing as a police officer, I get to a scene and somebody's hurt and I understand mama and daddy screaming, oh my God, my baby's going to die. Officer, tell me my baby's not going to die. At that point in time, this is not helping the patient. I need to keep them as calm as possible. I want their heart rate as low as possible. I want them as relaxed state as possible. I can't communicate with them and find out where they're hurting and treat them effectively if everybody's kind of freaking on out. So calm is contagious. Reassure them. I find this the fastest way to keep people from going into shock. That's an appropriate hand on the shoulder. Put their hand in your hand and say, hi, my name's Austin. Hey, you've been through a lot. You're doing great. I've seen worse than this. You're going to be okay. I don't care if they're missing their head. I'm going to tell them you're going to be okay. We're going to talk positive, because I have seen some people that I thought were going to be dead on arrival at hospital who survived it somehow. So we always talk positive and future-based. If they're in a great deal of pain, one thing I really like talking about is future-based. If that's not it, I like doing some sort of verbal dynamic conversation. You like Italian food? What kind of Italian food? And I've had people rolling around all of a sudden, they go, what? And I go, thick crust, thin crust pizza. Anything I can do to take their mind off the pain and the immediate problem. And a lot of times that'll just snap up enough to where I can get just a little bit of calm. Because remember, if their emotions are up here, their logic is down here. I need to get these two things together. I need to find out, are you on blood thinners? Okay. Are you pregnant? Are you epileptic? Are you a drug user? There's things I need to find out about this person. When's the last time you ate? There's just, I need to be talking to this patient, and I need to be able to get in their head and say, hey guys, we're here to work together. I'm not going to leave you. I've seen worse, and we're going to get you out of here. Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you. And you want to do rapid casualty evacuation. Keep them as warm as possible. Now, if they're laying on a big section of wet carpet that's got their blood, it may be worth moving the patient. Moving the patient is always a risk. Every time you move them, you lower their chance of survival, but it might be worth moving them off that thing. If they're on carpet and you can kind of roll them over, then put a fresh dry blanket underneath it, roll them back, that's great. If you don't have anything to cover them up, you don't have a space blanket, tear down some curtains or roll them up in a rug or whatever you can. We have to preserve that body heat. And remember, that's where our little handy dandy heat pack come on in, and our emergency blanket. Some final closing thoughts on this thing. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if you're ever gonna have to use your handgun to protect yourself. But if you do know how to stop the bleed, we get a whole lot more credit in this life for saving lives than taking them. Also, if we are in a situation where we shoot and somehow, heaven help us, we miss, police officers only hit about a third of what they shoot at, about a third of what they intentionally shoot at under pressure, and that's been consistent since the 1800s, about 1/3. That means we may miss when somebody's moving dynamic and we're moving dynamic. And if one of our rounds misses our bad guy and takes on an innocent, we need to jump on that, take responsibility, and keep that person from dying. Car crashes, home invasions, the list goes on and on and on. You may not have EMS there. It was just some real simple things, a couple of Ziploc bags, a couple of pairs of gloves, trauma shears, a couple of tourniquets, some wound packing material, space blankets, some tape, some battle wrap. You can do a lot of good work. And remember, nothing we do is going to make them better. That is a surgical suite. What we can do, though, is hit the pause button and buy them more time. The thing is, we'd really like to get them there within an hour of the mechanism of injury, the golden hour. And if we can get them there even faster, that's even better. But unfortunately, due to current events, the city I patrol in, we may be 20 minutes away from an ambulance, and maybe even more than that if they're on calls or whatnot. Yeah, we can get an emergency helicopter to land there in about 10 minutes from the Texas Medical Center. But that's assuming that helicopter's not busy somewhere else and we got weather for them to come on in. So there's a whole lot of things that could go south where it's just you. Recently, I was talking to the city manager. It was kind of interesting because he was telling me that he wanted to make sure that all the people that did yard work around the city never did it by themselves. There's always somebody with them. I said, why? Well, in case somebody slips the chainsaw or falls off a ladder. I'm like going, well, do they have tourniquets, chest seals, little trainings? They understand the mnemonic of stop? And he says, what are you talking about? I said, the other person there is really going to be able to hold their hand while they go to the light. They're not going to be able to. I said, if you're going to have somebody there, that's great. Make sure they have a way to handle it. He's like, oh my gosh, I need you to train all of our city employees. And I'm going, just add that to my list of stuff to do for Lieutenant Davis. But it is amazing how these tools really are not that expensive, and they can change the quality and quantity of someone's life. You can literally save someone's life. And if I had to either say, I want you either CPR certified or Stop the Bleed certified, I think I'd probably vote for Stop the Bleed certified. I think there's probably more of a case for that actually being useful for you is a mechanism of saving and preserving innocent life. So closing thoughts are, massive hemorrhage is always bad. All bleeding will stop eventually. Hopefully we stop it on our terms and we still have blood left in the body. Time is usually not our friend, and lives often depend on both the quickness and the quality of our action. And if you forget everything, just remember this: stop the killing, stop the dying, and rapid evacuation of casualties. Stop the killing. That means if they're shooting up people, grab as many people and get them out of direct path. If somebody got hit by a car crossing the street and they're still in the street, get them out of the direct path. Try not to treat under direct care, treat under indirect threat care. And remember, if you don't have your gear with you, it's hard to use it. So I highly recommend having a couple of tourniquets, some wound packing material, some shears, and a couple of Ziploc bags in every one of your vehicles. If you have a defensive gun that you sleep with hopefully in a secure safe and whatever you need to have for ready access, I also think it might be helpful to have, a couple of tourniquets, some chest seals and whatnot in the home, because if we're in a gunfight, it's two ways. And so if they shoot you or a family member, again, we're all we got until EMS shows up. So hopefully you got something out of this, and that should be when my lovely co-host comes back in and says, "Yay!
Yay! I'm back." Thank you, Austin, for all these helpful tips and kit options so we can all continue to stay prepared. Even the Amazon tip. Sadly, I'm a frequent Amazon shopper, so it's a great small tip to be aware of about the tourniquet kits, because I would not have known that. I would look at it, I would look at the reviews and like videos. I'm like, is that a real one? But now we know. Don't get it off of Amazon.
I can see, and I order all kinds of stuff. I ordered, all this came off Amazon. My battle rack, order everything off Amazon, not a problem, except tourniquets.
Right.
So it hurts my soul to say that, because I'm a guy who loves to click the button and it shows up. It's like Christmas. Every time the little truck rolls up, it's like, oh look, it's like a Santa Claus.
They make it real easy. But this was a pretty serious topic, and while we all hope to never face a situation like this, the reality is it could happen. It's better to be prepared. So we're glad to have Austin better prepare us. But if you ever do find yourself needing to protect yourself or someone else, there's a good chance that you'll have to deal with an attorney and court proceedings afterwards. Before we move into the Q&A, make sure you're submitting all your questions in the comments. We'll be a couple minutes until we get there. I'm going to quickly discuss how Firearms Legal Protection can support you in these critical moments.
Firearms Legal Protection offers several different memberships to whoever is interested in signing up for legal protection. These plans are divided into individual plans and a family plan, which some benefits and pricing vary state by state. For the purposes of this webinar, we will look at our most common plans and benefits that are available in most states. The individual basic plan includes protection in your state of residence. It also includes an uncapped payment of attorney fees for defense of criminal and civil cases. Firearms Legal Protection memberships also extend to all legal weapons, including non-lethal weapons. With the individual basic plan, you also have Defense of Extreme Risk Protection Orders, also known as red flag laws. All plans have access to the 24/7 emergency attorney answered hotline, so no matter a time an incident may occur, you can count on our hotline and an attorney will pick up for immediate attorney-client privileges. You also have access to the MyFLP mobile app and one of our recently added benefits, expungement of criminal record on non-conviction incidents. Members of all plans also receive access to digital content and special discounts. The next step up is the individual premium plan. This plan has nationwide coverage and also includes all the benefits just mentioned and payment of bail bond premium, payment of expert witness and investigator fees if either are needed in your case. There's also coordination of counseling support, payment of lost wages if you are out of work during trial, and a list of other benefits. We also have the family premium plan to choose from for those who want the same protection also applied to their family. For just a little bit more, you get all the benefits that were just mentioned applied to your spouse and all minor children. If you want more information over these benefits, then check out our Instagram or Facebook page for uploaded explained benefit videos. Remember, if you, friends, or family are not already protected by Firearms Legal Protection, please click the link below for a special discount we offer our webinar viewers. Now, let's get back to today's webinar.
All right, we're back, and we'll go through some of the pre-submitted questions first. A lot of it's going to be kind of a recap of what you already discussed, but it'll be good to touch on again, and then there's a couple I saw in the comments. Let's start with this one. How do I assess the severity of a gunshot wound?
Well, let's start with the basics. And many years ago, I had a bad skydiving accident, and people always go, bad skydiving accident. And then I realized I was afraid, because is there a good skydiving accident? No, there's not. So if it's a gunshot wound, it's severe. But here's the thing about a gunshot wound is, just because you got shot doesn't mean you're going to bleed out or die. It is not uncommon for someone to get shot, especially with a handgun, and walk out of the hospital about 3 or 4 hours. Basically, they irrigate it. They put a a Band-Aid on the front and the back, and out you go. So it's amazing. I know 2 officers from 2 separate departments who don't know each other, who both had shot somebody in the forehead. It skimmed right along the scalp and came out the back. Both those people had the suspect had incredible headache, but they basically just put a couple stitches here, a couple stitches here, and sent him off, cleared him to jail. And the first time I heard it, I thought, this is the strangest thing I ever heard. So bullets just unpredictable. You may get shot with a .22 pistol, and it may hit a knee and shoot up and just pierce an artery that sends you out. So, we really don't know what the severity is. If it's bleeding, that's a problem. If it's causing breathing problems, that's a problem. And almost anything, we want to get to the next level of care. But if it's bleeding, we have to stop it. They're probably going to bleed out before we can get them to the hospital. If it's breathing, we need to say gasoline, diesel, jet fuel. Let's get them to the next level of care, and let's get them quick. So,
Yeah.
Good question.
All right. Next question. What are the biggest mistakes people make when trying to treat a gunshot wound?
Not securing the scene. If we're in a home invasion, I'm over at your house for the weekend, and all of a sudden somebody kicks in the front door, we'll do a Netflix and chill, and they shoot me. You pull out your gun and shoot that person. Look at me and go, it sucks being you, Austin, but I gotta go stop this threat. The problem we have is when somebody gets injured in a gunshot wound is we try to treat in an area that it's not safe, whether that's still an active shooting situation, it's still moving traffic. And a lot of us in a crisis don't know what to do. We get overwhelmed by events. Just think, STOP, secure the scene, treat the bleeding. We can't put the blood back in the body, open airway. Then the next thing is prevent shock and rapid casualty evacuation. Get them to the next level of care as soon as you can.
Yeah. All right. Next question. How long can someone survive with uncontrolled bleeding?
It's a very interesting question. Because I don't know what size the person is. I'm not being flippant. There's weight categories on how much blood you can donate when you go to the American Red Cross. If you're below, I think it's like 105 pounds, I don't think they want to let you take blood, because when you get to half a liter, it's like 13% of your blood loss. So we don't know. Also, I don't know how much blood you lose until other organs start to suffer for it. And it's kind of irreversible unless you got whole blood to replace it. So it's really tough to say. More important question is if we have uncontrolled bleeding, how quickly can we get on there to try to save every drop in the blood? There's no good answer to this. And again, I've seen gunshot wounds before that there was very little bleeding. I mean, like shaving bleeding. I mean, it just didn't hit anything. And sometimes, you see a lot of blood with it. So there's no real tell how long somebody can survive with uncontrolled bleeding. I do know this, all bleeding will eventually stop. And it only takes about 1/4 of an inch or 6 millimeter nick on an artery, which is 100% fatal if not treated.
Yeah. All right. Next question. When should I use a tourniquet, and how do I know if it's necessary?
The good news about a tourniquet is if you make a mistake, no one's going to lose a limb for it. I don't know how long you'd have to have one on there if that's a problem. And if you're in an austere setting, it's going to be 2 or 3 days. That might be a different situation. But, we're probably never going to be more than an hour unless you live in some remote location. So use a tourniquet if you say, man, this is a massive amount of extremity bleeding. I think I need to put a tourniquet on. And if you're still not real sure, then you may want to go 2 or 3 inches above the wound if you're sure that you understand the entrance and exit and all the mechanisms involved, that the vessel hasn't retracted up into the limb. And then, 3 to 4 inches above it, cinch it on down. Every time you move and check every 3 to 5 minutes. So if you have a doubt and you're thinking, man, that's a lot of blood, I wonder if I should, go ahead and throw it on. Better to err the side of caution. Firefighters say all the time, cops will take a paper cut and throw a tourniquet on it, and anybody falls asleep, they're going to get Narcan. So, but if you're asleep and you get Narcan and you're not an opioid problem, it's probably not a problem. And if you put a tourniquet on and there's some bleeding and it saved your life, that's great. If it was unnecessary, well, at least we're erring the side of caution. If you go, that's a ton of blood and it's extremity wound. If you feel comfortable throwing one on, throw it on.
Right. All right. Couple more pre-submitted questions and I'll go through the comments. Are there any alternatives to a tourniquet if I don't have one available?
There are ways. There's a really cool method where you take a pair of trauma shears, and if they're wearing some fairly thick pants like blue jeans or something that's not, like yoga pants, stretchy, you run up and you make about a 3-inch long bands up in there. you take and circle them around, tie a square knot, then take something really substantial, like a flashlight or a pocket knife, and stick it in the material, and then crank on down, then take and tape it off, or have someone hold on to this. Remember, a tourniquet isn't a tourniquet unless it has a windlass. So you really can't take this thing and tighten it down enough to get it done. To get the circumferential pressure you need to have something in there that you can crank the mechanical leverage to get this tight. And remember, the more muscular someone is, or the more adipose tissue, the fatter they are, the harder it's going to be to get that pressure to get past all that adipose down into the vascular system. So if all you got's a makeshift tourniquet, there's some ways we can do that. And if y'all ever need some ditch medicine tips, we may want to do a class on ditch medicine one day.
No, I'll note it like I always do. All right. Last pre-submitted question. What should I do if the victim loses consciousness?
If you think that they are going to lose consciousness because of blood loss, we want to get them as close to the earth as possible the minute you think they're getting woozy. What really concerns me, and this is a great question, because, I'm 6 foot tall. If I'm standing up and I just go bloop, that fall from my head to here could be fatal or life-altering. So if you think there's any way that they've lost so much blood they may lose consciousness, either get their butt on the ground or get their whole body on the ground so that they do lose consciousness. It's not the head thudding off the pavement that causes the next mechanism of injury. Good question. Good question.
That's a great point, too, because you wouldn't think, when they're standing up, you're like thinking when they lose consciousness laying down. But if they're standing up, that's something to think about, because then if they fall, like you're saying,
that's one of the reasons why I don't like putting a tourniquet on somebody when they're in a chair. Look, we're already in a situation where they lose consciousness for a lot of reasons. And at that point, I like to get them as close to the earth as possible. It's like when you shoot a rifle. The closer you are to the earth, the more stable it is. You're a lot more stable prone than standing up. You're a lot more stable kneeling and shooting than you are standing up. You're a lot more stable prone than kneeling. So the closer we get up to the earth, the more stable they are, the less impact less problems you're going to have for them passing out. Good question.
Yeah, definitely. All right. I think we just might have had like one or two in the comments. I saw Rick had a lot of really good comments about classes and other things you can take. And I think he might have had one question. And then someone asked about making a shopping list for some of the items that you talked about during the webinar, which I'll get that all in the description. So if you come back tomorrow or Friday, then we'll make sure to have that list all there. Just not the Amazon tourniquet.
But let's talk about this for a second. One of the things I'm a big fan of, and if you kind of notice my gear laying around here, it looks kind of haphazard. The reason is I like buying each item separately than getting it in some pre-done kit. Because, like the battle wrap, you may not find that in a kit. And I think battle wrap is really an undervalued piece of kit. It's sort of like the multi-tool. I think having duct tape in there. So in the hand warmers, there's just certain things that I need to treat for what I'm qualified to use. And, if you get a pre-done kit, it's not your stuff. I didn't put it in there. I didn't buy it. And then one thing I didn't mention about it is also pack your kit the way you need it. Gloves should never be at the bottom. They're at the top. Tourniquets are at the top. The space blanket and the warmers, they go at the bottom. Put them in the order of the way you'll need it. If you have 2 Ziploc bags, you can put the outer bag inside the inner bag, between the outer bag and the inner bag. That's like a whole pocket, and you get like a 3-pocket thing, and you can look up and see it. And if I need a chest seal, if I need a quick thing, that'll kind of work. So if I could have one item in my range bag for medical assistance, what would that be? It would be a kit that I designed myself that was in a Ziploc bag.
Technically one item, since one bag.
For me, then it would probably be 2 tourniquets. Probably be 2 tourniquets. And then if we got someone who got shot in the chest or a junctional area, maybe tourniquets and, okay, I got to do 2. I put 2 tourniquets and a pair of X shears in there at least. That would be it. Another thing that's kind of interesting about going to a range is if you don't have a kit with you, ask them where their blowout kit is and ask them if you can go see it. It's amazing how many times I go there and the tourniquet's still in plastic. These are not sterile devices. And the last thing I want to do with bloody hands is try to open the cellophane around my cat tourniquet to get this thing on in. The reason I like carrying my own tourniquets is, in case you watch, I don't know if you saw me fold this up, there's a certain way that I teach people to fold these things so I can deploy it one hand. So if I've got pressure on you, I can go like that. I can go ahead and start working on it. If I fold it another way, I've got to put it in my teeth and try to get a free hand. And so almost invariably in one of these situations, you're in a place where you just don't have enough hands. That's why I'm a big fan of calling somebody over. A couple of extra set of hands always, especially if you got to move somebody. So I can't answer this question with one thing. If I had to do one thing, find a tourniquet, but 2 tourniquets and trauma shears and some wound packing material. I
There
think
you go.
I call it a kit. Kit.
Technically, it can be one thing. It's a kit.
Kit.
We had one more question, and then we'll outro this webinar. But he was asking if you could use a BP cuff. I'm assuming this was whenever we were talking about alternative, like tourniquet.
Yeah, you're not going to get the problem is that's going to stop the venous blood return. It's not going to stop the arterial. I really don't think so. You might be able to somehow modify it to where you sort of packed it with like a non-compressible material and put it over it, then pumped it up. There's some great tourniquets designs that I've seen that work sort of off that same principle that you cinch it down and then fill it full of air. They're really bulky and really expensive. And I need something that's been around for a long time that's proven for me to feel comfortable using it. So I don't think you probably could. No, checking your blood pressure, though, will probably keep you a lot longer because what's the number one cause of death in the United States? Heart disease. So if you've got a blood pressure cuff, you're reading it, there you go. 120/80 here for Lieutenant Davis. Just saying.
He's healthy. All right, I'm going to outro us. Is there any last comments that you want to give our viewers before I send us home?
Guys, just if you decide to go down this path, again, I can't recommend enough to go to a Stop the Bleed class. If you can go to an alert civilian response to active shooter, civilian response to active shooter class, there's scenario-based training in there, which I think can make a real big difference. As y'all know, I think it's all fun and games until the pressure's on. That's why I want you to train in the same sort of mindset. If you train the lowest cognitive behavior available, and then you're expected to perform on a high demand where you have a lot of stimulus coming in and a lot of choices, that's a recipe for failure. We don't rise our level of training. We fall to our level. We don't rise our level of expectation. We fall to our lowest level of training. And I've just seen so many people who have solid skill sets in the classroom, but when I put them in the scenarios, boom. And again, for 12 years, I've been using the same techniques with a limited toolkit in my simulators and having people treat, like, okay, now that home version, now you look over, I'm on the ground. What do you do? They just lock up, just like I did my first time in first responder medical when I had multiple patients and I had someone who was down, who was non-compliant. So we just need to stress test this stuff. And if all else fails, remember, be a guardian always and a warrior when needed.
Love it. Okay, everyone, I'm going to wrap up our webinar for this month. If you have any additional questions or would like to join one of Austin's simulator training or Conceal Coalition courses, then please just email me at marketing@firearmslegal.com. And again, thank you everyone for joining this month's webinar. Remember to click the links in the caption below to get protected if you aren't already protected by Firearms Legal Protection. And there's also a link down there just to let me know what you would like to see in our future webinars. Just give us topic ideas if there's something that we might have not hit, or if there's something we can just retouch on, then that's also great. But all of our webinars are live on Facebook and YouTube, so just make sure to like and subscribe to our page so you can get notifications for any future webinars that we do have. But thank you again, everyone, for joining tonight. And thank you so much, Austin, as always, for teaching us. And we will all see you next month. As always, have a great rest of your night. And remember, protect yourself. We'll protect you. Night, everyone.